Hello my beloved friends, and welcome back to the Untold Stories. Now I know a lot of you use these videos to sleep, so before you drift off, I thought it would be a crazy idea if everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world. Also like and subscribe if you are enjoying the case. Right, let's get comfy and relax, and let's begin this episode by the first story, The Shadow on My Doorstep. October 12th, 2023, 8:45 p.m. It started on a cold, damp evening in downtown Chicago. I was walking home from work, my breath visible in the crisp autumn air, when I passed him. He was sitting on the corner of Wabash and Randolph, his face obscured by a tattered hoodie, a cardboard sign resting against his knees. The sign read, "Anything helps. God bless." His hands were trembling, either from the cold or something else. I didn't stop. I never do. I've seen too many scams, too many people who just want money for booze or drugs. I told myself I was being smart, cautious. But that night, I made a mistake. I didn't even look at him. I just walked past, my hands shoved deep into my coat pockets, my eyes fixed on the pavement. But as I passed, I heard him mutter something under his breath. It wasn't loud, but it was clear enough to send a chill down my spine. "You'll regret it." I froze for a second, my heart skipping a beat. I turned around, but he was just sitting there, staring at the ground, as if he hadn't said a word. I shook it off. Just another crazy homeless guy, right? That's what I told myself. But deep down, I knew something was off. His voice, it wasn't angry or desperate. It was calm. Almost promising. October 14th, 2023, 7:30 p.m. 2 days later, I saw him again. This time, I was leaving a coffee shop on Michigan Avenue. He was standing across the street, his hood still up, his face hidden in shadow. He wasn't holding a sign. He wasn't asking for anything. He was just staring at me. I felt my stomach twist. It had to be a coincidence, right? Chicago's a big city, but it's not that big. Maybe he just happened to be there. Maybe. I quickened my pace, weaving through the crowd, trying to lose myself in the sea of people. But when I glanced back, he was still there, standing perfectly still, his eyes locked on me. I couldn't see his face, but I could feel his gaze. It was like a weight pressing down on me, suffocating me. I ducked into the nearest store and waited for what felt like an eternity before I dared to leave. When I finally stepped outside, he was gone. October 16th, 2023, 11:15 p.m. The first time he showed up at my house, I almost called the police. I was sitting in my living room, watching TV, when I saw movement outside the window. I live on the first floor of a small apartment building, so it's not uncommon to see people walking by. But this was different. He was just standing there, on the sidewalk, staring at my window. His hood was down now, and for the first time, I saw his face. It was gaunt, almost skeletal, with hollow cheeks and sunken eyes. His skin was pale, almost gray, and his lips were cracked and dry. But it was his eyes that terrified me the most. They were dark, empty, and yet they seemed to burn with something. Hatred? Hunger? I couldn't tell. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking as I dialed 911. But just as I was about to hit call, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. I told myself it was just a coincidence. That he didn't know where I lived. That he wasn't really following me. But deep down, I knew the truth. He was watching me. And he wasn't going to stop. October 18th, 2023, 3 a.m. I woke up to the sound of scratching. At first, I thought it was a tree branch against the window. But as I lay there, my heart pounding in my chest, I realized it was coming from the front door. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by my bed and crept into the hallway, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. The scratching stopped. For a moment, there was silence. Then, a soft, almost melodic voice whispered through the door. "You'll regret it." I froze, my blood turning to ice. It was him. I knew it was him. I wanted to scream, to call the police, to do something. But I couldn't move. I just stood there, clutching the bat, listening to the sound of his footsteps as he walked away. October 20th, 2023, 9 p.m. He's outside every night now. I don't know how he finds me. I've taken different routes home, left work at different times, even stayed at a friend's house for a night. But no matter where I go, he's there. Standing on the corner, sitting on a bench, leaning against a lamppost. Always watching. Always waiting. I've tried to talk to him, to ask him what he wants. But he never responds. He just stares at me with those empty, burning eyes, his lips curled into a faint, almost mocking smile. I've called the police, but they can't do anything. He's not breaking any laws. He's just there. October 22nd, 2023, 12 a.m. Tonight, I saw him in my dreams. He was standing at the foot of my bed, his face inches from mine, his breath cold and foul. He didn't say anything. He just stared at me, his eyes boring into mine, until I woke up screaming. But when I opened my eyes, he was still there. Standing in the corner of my room, his head tilted to the side, his smile wider than ever. "You'll regret it. I don't know how much longer I can take this." He's not just following me anymore. He's inside my head. I can't eat. I can't sleep. I can't think about anything but him. And I know, deep down, that this isn't going to end. Not until he gets what he wants. But what does he want? Money? Revenge? Or something worse? I don't know. But I do know one thing. I regret it. I regret it so much. Let's jump to the next story of this episode that will make you go deep into your bed. We titled it The Man Under the Bridge. November 5th, 2023 at 6:20 p.m. It was raining that night. Not a gentle drizzle, but a relentless, icy downpour that soaked through my coat and made the streets of Seattle shimmer under the streetlights. I was hurrying home from the bus stop, my head down, when I saw him. He was huddled under the overpass on 4th Avenue, his body wrapped in a sodden blanket, his face hidden beneath a frayed beanie. A crumpled paper cup sat in front of him, half filled with rainwater. I didn't stop. I never do. I've lived in the city long enough to know better. But as I passed, he called out to me. His voice was raspy, like gravel underfoot, but there was something unnervingly calm about it. "Spare some change?" I shook my head without looking at him. "Sorry, man," I muttered, quickening my pace. I didn't think much of it at the time. But then I heard him laugh. It was a low, guttural sound that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "You'll wish you had," he said. I glanced back, but he was just sitting there, staring at the ground, his face still hidden. I told myself it was nothing. Just another homeless guy trying to guilt-trip me. But his words stuck with me, like a splinter I couldn't quite dig out. November 7th, 2023 at 8:15 p.m. 2 days later, I saw him again. This time, I was walking through Pioneer Square, heading to a bar to meet some friends. He was standing near the entrance to an alley, his beanie pulled low over his eyes, his hands stuffed into the pockets of his tattered jacket. He wasn't begging. He wasn't doing anything. He was just watching. I tried to ignore him, but I could feel his eyes on me as I walked past. When I reached the bar, I turned around, half expecting him to be gone. But he was still there, standing in the same spot, his head tilted slightly, as if he were studying me. I felt a shiver run down my spine, but I shook it off. It was just a coincidence, I told myself. Just a weird, creepy coincidence. November 9th, 2023 at 11:30 p.m. The first time he showed up near my apartment, I almost didn't recognize him. I was taking out the trash when I saw a figure standing under the street lamp at the end of the block. He was wearing the same beanie, the same tattered jacket, but his face was hidden in shadow. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest, as he took a step toward me. "You remember me," he said. It wasn't a question. I dropped the trash bag and bolted back inside, slamming the door behind me. I locked it, then checked all the windows, my hands trembling. When I finally worked up the courage to look outside, he was gone. But I knew he'd be back. November 11th, 2023 at 2 a.m. I woke up to the sound of tapping. At first, I thought it was the wind rattling the branches of the tree outside my window. But as I lay there, my heart racing, I realized it was coming from the front door. I grabbed my phone and crept into the hallway, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The tapping stopped. For a moment, there was silence. Then, a voice whispered through the door. "You'll wish you had." I called the police, but by the time they arrived, he was gone. They searched the area, but they didn't find anything. Just a wet footprint on my doorstep, slowly fading in the cold night air. November 13th, 2023 at 7:45 p.m. He's everywhere now. I see him on my way to work, standing on the corner of 5th and James. I see him outside the grocery store, leaning against the wall, his face hidden beneath that damn beanie. I see him in my dreams, standing at the foot of my bed, his eyes glowing in the dark. I've tried to talk to him, to ask him what he wants. But he never answers. He just stares at me, his lips curled into a faint, almost mocking smile. I've changed my routine, taken different routes, even stayed at a hotel for a few nights. But no matter where I go, he's there. Watching. Waiting. November 15th, 2023 at 12 a.m. Tonight, I saw him in my apartment. I don't know how he got in. I locked the doors. I checked the windows. But when I walked into the living room, he was sitting on the couch, his hands resting on his knees, his head tilted to the side. "You'll wish you had," he said, his voice calm, almost gentle. I screamed and ran for the door, but it was locked. When I turned around, he was gone. But I could still smell him, a faint, sour odor that lingered in the air, like damp earth and rotting leaves. November 17th, 2023 at 3 a.m. I don't know how much longer I can take this. He's not just following me anymore. He's inside my head. I can't eat. I can't sleep. I can't think about anything but him. And I know, deep down, that this isn't going to end. Not until he gets what he wants. But what does he want? Money? Revenge? Or something worse? I don't know. But I do know one thing. I wish I had given him that damn change. Our last story of today's episode, called The Eyes That Follow. December 3rd, 2023, 5:45 p.m. It was a cold, gray afternoon in Denver, and I was in a hurry. I had just finished grabbing a few things from Walmart, groceries, toiletries, the usual, and was loading the bags into my car when he approached me. He was an older man, maybe in his late 50s, with a scruffy beard and a worn-out jacket that looked like it hadn't been washed in months. His eyes were bloodshot, and his hands trembled as he held out a crumpled paper bag. "Miss," he said, his voice shaky but polite, "could you spare some food? Anything helps." I didn't even look at him. I was tired, stressed, and just wanted to get home. "Get out of my face," I snapped, slamming my car door shut. I didn't mean to be cruel, but the words came out harsher than I intended. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, staring at me with those hollow, sunken eyes. For a moment, I thought I saw something flicker in them, anger, maybe, or sadness. But then he turned and shuffled away, disappearing into the parking lot. I told myself I didn't care. He was just another homeless guy, one of dozens I'd seen around the city. But as I drove home, his face kept popping into my mind. Those eyes. That look. It was like he'd carved himself into my memory, and I couldn't shake him. December 5th, 2023, 7:30 p.m. 2 days later, I saw him again. I was walking out of a coffee shop on Colfax Avenue when I spotted him sitting on the sidewalk, his back against the brick wall of a building. He wasn't begging. He wasn't doing anything. He was just sitting there, staring straight ahead, his face expressionless. But as I walked past, his head snapped toward me, and his eyes locked onto mine. "You shouldn't have said that," he said, his voice low and gravelly. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. "What are you talking about?" I asked, trying to sound brave. He didn't answer. He just kept staring at me, his lips curling into a faint, almost mocking smile. I turned and walked away, my hands trembling. When I glanced back, he was still sitting there, watching me. December 7th, 2023, 10 p.m. The nightmares started that night. I dreamed I was back in the Walmart parking lot, loading groceries into my car. But this time, when the man approached me, his face was different. It was gaunt, almost skeletal, and his eyes were black, like two bottomless pits. He didn't ask for food. He just stood there, staring at me, until I woke up screaming. I told myself it was just a dream. But the next day, I saw him again. This time, he was standing outside my apartment building, his hands stuffed into the pockets of his jacket, his head tilted to the side. When I stepped outside, he smiled, a cold, empty smile that made my blood run cold. "You shouldn't have said that," he repeated. I slammed the door shut and locked it, my heart racing. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, he was gone. They searched the area, but they didn't find anything. Just a single crumpled paper bag sitting on the sidewalk, like a twisted reminder of what I'd done. December 9th, 2023, 3 a.m. I woke up to the sound of knocking. At first, I thought it was the wind, rattling the windows. But as I lay there, my heart pounding in my chest, I realized it was coming from the front door. I grabbed my phone and crept into the hallway, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The knocking stopped. For a moment, there was silence. Then, a voice whispered through the door. "You shouldn't have said that." I screamed and backed away, my hands trembling as I dialed 911. But when the police arrived, there was no one there. Just a faint, sour smell lingering in the air, like damp earth and rotting leaves. December 11th, 2023, 8 p.m. He's everywhere now. I see him on my way to work, standing on the corner of 16th and Broadway. I see him outside the grocery store, leaning against the wall, his face hidden beneath that damn beanie. I see him in my dreams, standing at the foot of my bed, his eyes glowing in the dark. I've tried to talk to him, to ask him what he wants. But he never answers. He just stares at me, his lips curled into that faint, almost mocking smile. I've changed my routine, taken different routes, even stayed at a friend's house for a few nights. But no matter where I go, he's there. Watching. Waiting. December 13th, 2023, 12 a.m. Tonight, I saw him in my apartment. I don't know how he got in. I locked the doors. I checked the windows. But when I walked into the living room, he was sitting on the couch, his hands resting on his knees, his head tilted to the side. "You shouldn't have said that," he said, his voice calm, almost gentle. I screamed and ran for the door, but it was locked. When I turned around, he was gone. But I could still smell him, a faint, sour odor that lingered in the air, like damp earth and rotting leaves. December 15th, 2023, 3 a.m. I don't know how much longer I can take this. He's not just following me anymore. He's inside my head. I can't eat. I can't sleep. I can't think about anything but him. And I know, deep down, that this isn't going to end. Not until he gets what he wants. But what does he want? An apology? Revenge? Or something worse? I don't know. But I do know one thing. I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have said anything. And now, I'm leaving. I'm packing my bags and getting out of this city. I don't know where I'll go, but it doesn't matter. Anywhere is better than here. Anywhere is better than living with the curse of the forgotten. December 17th, 2023, 2:45 p.m. I thought I'd gotten away. I thought that by leaving Denver, I could escape whatever this thing was that had been haunting me. I packed up my car with as much as I could fit, left behind the life I knew, and drove for hours, heading south. Somewhere along the road, I hoped the miles would cleanse me, would somehow erase his presence. But by the time I reached Santa Fe, the nightmare had followed me. I was in a gas station, filling up my car, when I felt it. That oppressive weight in the air, like a storm building up, just waiting to break. I scanned the lot, half expecting to see him standing there. But there was no one. Still, the dread was suffocating. I shook my head, trying to shake off the thought, but when I turned around to head inside the store, there he was, just standing there in the doorway. His face was worse than I remembered. His skin was now pale and waxy, stretched too tight over the bones, as though it had been dipped in some kind of freezing liquid. His eyes were wide and black, bottomless, sucking all light from the air around him. He was smiling, that same eerie, mocking smile that made my skin crawl. "You shouldn't have said that," he rasped, his voice like broken glass scraping against metal. My heart dropped into my stomach. I turned and ran out the door, but when I reached my car, the keys fumbled in my trembling hands. I finally wrenched the door open, jumped inside, and slammed it shut. The whole time, I felt his eyes on me. Watching. Waiting. I drove off, my heart pounding, the image of his face seared into my mind. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there. And I realized something that made my blood run cold. He wasn't just following me. He was everywhere. December 17th, 2023, 9 p.m. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, his face appeared in the dark corners of my mind. Every creak of the house, every whisper of wind against the windows, made me think he was outside, watching, waiting for the right moment. I called my friend Jessica, just to hear a familiar voice. She answered on the second ring, and I almost cried out in relief. But as we started talking, the call cut off. I checked my phone, but there was no signal. No bars, no Wi-Fi. It was like the world had suddenly gone silent, as if I was completely cut off from everything. I put the phone down, and that's when I heard it. Tapping. It started light, like someone was tapping gently on the walls. But as the seconds dragged on, the tapping grew louder, faster, until it felt like a fist hammering against the walls. I ran to the windows, peering outside into the darkness, but I saw nothing. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw movement. There he was, standing at the edge of the property, under the dim light of the street lamp. He didn't move. He just stared. I couldn't breathe. I slammed the curtains shut, but it didn't stop him. No matter where I went inside the house, I could feel him there, waiting. December 18th, 2023, 1:30 a.m. I haven't been able to sleep at all. The tapping stopped, but the quiet was more unsettling. The air felt thick, oppressive, as if something was pressing down on me, suffocating me. I sat in the living room, clutching a kitchen knife, trying to steady my hands. I had barricaded myself inside, bolting all the windows and doors. I kept checking the locks, making sure nothing was out of place, but every time I did, I felt like I was being watched. Finally, I saw it, the shadow. It moved across the wall, a dark, twisting shape, just behind the couch. I spun around, my heart in my throat, but no one was there. The house had fallen deathly silent. And then, I heard him. His voice. It was inside the walls. "You shouldn't have said that." I screamed and scrambled for the door. But it wouldn't open. The walls began to crack, thin fissures spreading like veins across the drywall. And through those cracks, I saw them, dark, slithering shapes. Like something was crawling inside the walls. The shadows twisted and writhed, moving closer, as if whatever was inside was reaching out for me. The floor beneath my feet creaked, and I heard him again. His voice was all around me now, vibrating in my skull. "You shouldn't have said that." Then everything went black. December 18th, 2023, 4 a.m. I woke up in the woods. I don't know how I got here. One minute, I was locked inside that house, trapped in my own nightmare, and the next, I was on the cold, wet ground, surrounded by trees. I stumbled to my feet, disoriented, looking around. The sky was gray, the air damp and cold, and the smell of decay, earth, damp leaves, and something else hung in the air. That's when I saw him again. He was standing in the distance, his dark eyes glimmering in the weak light of the early morning. The same crooked smile stretched across his face. But now, something was different. His face, it wasn't just a face anymore. It was melted, like wax dripping down a candle, the skin pulling apart, revealing the dark void beneath. His body was distorted, hunched, more monstrous than human. His hands, long and skeletal, reached toward me, fingers crooked and claw-like. "You shouldn't have said that," he said, his voice low, rasping like a whisper from the grave. I turned and ran, my breath coming in ragged gasps, but my legs felt weak, like they couldn't carry me fast enough. The trees closed in around me, the branches twisting and snapping, as if they were alive, trying to grab hold of me. His voice echoed behind me, but it wasn't just his voice anymore. There were others, too. Other voices, all whispering at once, muffled and distorted. "You shouldn't have said that." The last thing I remember is stumbling through the trees, the sound of footsteps following me, closer and closer, until I could hear nothing but the pounding of my own heart. I don't know what happened next, but I woke up in another place. A place where the shadows don't move quite right. A place where the air smells like rot and decay. A place where I know he's still watching, still waiting. And now, I know the truth, I can never escape him. No matter where I go, no matter how far I run, he'll always find me. You shouldn't have said that. And now, your life will be in my control.